In the Phrygian hill country there was once two trees which made all the peasants marvel, and no wonder, for one was an oak and the other a linden, and they grew from a single trunk. The story of how this came about is proof of the immeasurable power of the gods, and also of the way that they reward the humble and pious. Sometimes when Jupiter was tired of eating ambrosia, drinking nectar, even a little tired of listening to Apollo's lyre and watching the Graces dance, he would come down from Mount Olympus and visit Earth. He would disguise himself as a mortal and go looking for adventure. His favorite companion at these times was Mercury, the most entertaining of all the gods, the shrewdest and the most resourceful. On this particular trip, Jupiter had determined to find out how hospitable the people of Phrygia were. Hospitality was, of course, very important to him, since all guests who seek shelter in a strange land were under his special protection. The two gods accordingly took on the appearance of poor wayfarers, and they wandered through the land, knocking at each lowly hut or great house, asking for food and shelter. Not one would admit them. Every time they were dismissed insolently, the door slammed in their face. They made trial of hundreds of homes. All treated them the same way. At last they came upon a little hovel of the humblest sort, poorer than any they had yet seen. It had a roof made only of reeds. But here, when they knocked, the door was opened wide, and a cheerful voice bade them enter. They had to stoop to pass through the low entrance, but once inside they found themselves in a snug, clean room, where a kindly-faced old man and woman bade them welcome in the friendliest fashion, and then bustled about to make them comfortable. The old man set a bench near the fire, and bade them to stretch out on it and to rest their tired limbs. The old woman threw a soft covering over it. Her name was Baucis, she told the strangers, and her husband was Philemon. They had lived in this cottage all their married life, and they had always been happy. "We are poor folk," she said, "but poverty isn't so bad when you're willing to own up to it, and a contented spirit is a great help." All the while she was talking, she was busy doing things for them. The coals under the ashes on the hearth were fanned into life, and a cheerful fire was soon burning. Over this she hung a little kettle full of water, and just as it began to boil, her husband came in with a fine cabbage that he had grown. Into the kettle it went, with a piece of the pork which was hanging from one of the beams. While this cooked, Baucis set the table with her trembling old hands. One table leg was too short, but she propped it up with a bit of a broken dish. On the board she placed olives and radishes and several eggs which she had roasted in the ashes. By this time the cabbage and bacon were done, and the old man pushed two rickety couches up to the table and bade his guest to recline and eat. Presently he brought them cups of beechwood and an earthenware mixing bowl which held some very vinegar-like wine, plentifully diluted with water. Philemon, however, was clearly proud and happy to be able to add such cheer to their supper, and he kept watch to refill each cup as soon as it was emptied. The two old folks were so pleased and excited at the success of their hospitality that only very slowly did a strange thing dawn upon them. The mixing bowl kept full. No matter how many cups were poured from it, the level of the wine always stayed the same, up to the very brim. As they saw this wonder, each looked in terror at the other, and dropping their eyes, they prayed silently. Then in quavering voices and trembling all over, they begged their guest to pardon the poor refreshments that they had offered. "We have a goose," the old man said, "which we ought to have given our lordships, but if you will wait, it shall be done at once." To catch the goose, however, proved to be beyond their power. They tried in vain until they were worn out. Jupiter and Mercury watched them, greatly entertained. But when both Philemon and Baucis had to give up the chase, panting and exhausted, the gods felt it was time for them to take action. "You have been host to gods," they told the couple, "and you shall have your reward. This wicked country which despises the poor stranger will be bitterly punished, but not you." They then escorted the two out of the hut and told them to look all around. To their amazement, all they saw was water. The whole countryside had disappeared. A great lake surrounded them. Their neighbors had never been good to the old couple, but nevertheless they stood there and wept for them. But all of a sudden their tears were dried by an overwhelming wonder. Before their eyes, the tiny, lowly hut which had been their home for so long was turned into a stately pillared temple of the whitest marble with a golden roof. "Good people," Jupiter said, "ask whatever you want and you shall have your wish." The old people exchanged a hurried, whispered conversation. Then Philemon spoke. "Let us be your priests, guarding this temple for you. And since we have lived so long together, let neither of us ever have to live a day without the other. Grant that we may die together." The gods agreed, well pleased with the two. A long time they served in that grand building, and the story does not say whether they ever missed their cozy little room and its cheerful hearth. But one day, standing before the marble and golden magnificence, they fell to talking about their former life, which had been so hard and yet so happy. By now both were in extreme old age. As they exchanged memories, suddenly each saw the other growing leaves. Then bark was growing around them. They only had time to cry to each other, "Farewell, dear companion." As the words passed their lips, they became trees, but still close together. The linden and the oak grew from one trunk. From far and wide people came to admire this wonder, and they hung wreaths of flowers on the branches in honor of the pious and faithful couple. Oh my Curdy.